Hello Infiniteers, we are back in my Tron toy box today, and we're going to start working on the logic, beginning with the challenge in the Disc Duel Arena. Here is some footage of this game from the original movie. The players enter the arena, and they each take their place on a platform made up of rings. One player flings a ball at the other, and if the other player doesn't catch it, and the ball hits a ring, the ring disappears. And as the game goes on, more and more of each platform is removed, making it difficult for the players to keep their balance. And of course, the last player standing wins. Now the basic idea for this game is simple. We don't have rings like that in the toy box, but we do have blip blocks, and players can shoot or use their identity disc to either try to destroy the blip blocks or attack the enemy to either kill them or knock them off the platform. But even though the idea is simple enough, this was a very difficult game to implement. The two-player version is easy, but this toy box is primarily designed for a single player, and the single-player version of the Disc Duel Challenge was very difficult to make because the enemy AI is pretty dumb. Let me show you what I mean. Here was my first attempt at building this challenge. I built two platforms made up of blip blocks, and I put the player on one platform and spawned an enemy on the other. And here's what happened. I won the challenge without having to do anything. The enemy just ran off the edge of the platform. I tried several different enemies from 2.0, like this Elite Sakaran, but he did the same thing. And I tried several different enemies from 1.0, like this Zergbot, and it did the same thing too. The enemy movement AI just did not know what to do with the blip blocks. The only enemy that did work was this Omnidroid, but it worked too well. It doesn't really give the player any opportunity to fight back before it destroys the blip blocks below the player. So I tried replacing the blip blocks with a round Star Command platform from Building Sets Group 5. The enemy AI seemed a little happier with this, but because the enemy basically had nowhere to go, he just stood there and shot at me without moving, and that made it too easy. I also didn't like the fact that I couldn't make the platform disappear, so next I tried adding more enemies, and I tried attaching that platform to a path. The platform would start underneath the terrain, as you see here, and it would appear when the challenge started. I also added two targets for the player to shoot, and when both targets were hit, it would do a reset and stop on the path, which would cause the platform to disappear. I thought this was a clever idea, but here's how that worked. Once again, the enemies just ran off the side of the platform. Apparently, the enemy movement AI has the same problem with platforms attached to paths as it does with blip blocks. So next I decided to make the arena a little smaller and just fill the entire arena with blip blocks. And I also added some wall blocks to prevent the enemies from running outside the arena. And here's what happened when I ran this version. Notice the enemy on the right disappears. And a moment later, so does the enemy on the left. The one in the middle just lays there. But then I noticed that the two enemies that disappeared are now on top of the wall on the left. Again, it's clear that the enemy movement AI just does not like blip blocks, and so it moved the enemies to a safer place where they could stand, and the enemy AI would know what to do. So this design was not going to work at all. But then I wondered what would happen if I replaced some of the blip blocks with terrain cubes, which would give the enemy movement AI some place to go. And that actually worked out pretty well. Notice how the enemies jump from terrain cube to terrain cube, which you might expect a real enemy to do to avoid the blip blocks. And yet, if the enemy happens to get knocked off of a terrain cube and lands on a blip block, they're not stuck. They can still function, and they have somewhere to go. Unless, of course, you target the block they're standing on. But even then, they might surprise you by jumping out of the hole before they can fall to their death. So this is how I ended up with the Disc Duel challenge that you saw in my playthrough video. And this is what I'm going to show you how to build today. So let's start by reviewing the creativitoys that we're going to need. So first, I have a level starter, and all I've done, by the way, is just place these toys out of the creativitoys drawer. I have not changed any properties or done anything with them. I just did this to save a little time. But we have a level starter, I have a button, a logic gate, the challenge maker, a time delayer, another logic gate, and a replayer. Over here I have a scoreboard and another logic gate and an enemy wave generator. I have two player counters, one here and one here. We have a kill switch, and we have another time delayer out here. And there's a couple more things we're going to need, a couple of trigger areas, but I'll get to that in a moment. I think the best thing to start with would be to place the terrain cubes in here that we're going to need. So let me pull up my little screen grab here that I made for myself. Excuse me. And let's place in the terrain cubes that are going to be scattered throughout the arena here. So we're going to place 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the first terrain cube will sit there like that. Okay? And then we're going to do 1, 2, 3. More that way. Oops. And another terrain cube there. And one out here. Alright? And then we're going to go from here straight across to the other side till we touch the wall. And we're going to go 2 nudges back to the left. So we'll place one right there. And then we're going to place another one directly across from this one, lined up with that one. And another one directly across from this one, lined up like that. Okay? Alright, and then we'll go back to basic blocks, and I'm going to put one of these here, and one of these here, on either end. And we'll place the terrain cube off the corner of each of those, like you see here. Okay? And we'll go back to basic blocks, and now we have actually 4 blocks between these guys on either end, and I want one more in the middle. So we're going to put another terrain cube. We don't want to split anything, because remember, we're going to fill this with blip blocks, so we can't straddle blocks like this. But we could put one, for example, here, and one over here. Okay? And then take out all of these basic blocks. Sorry, had to turn off my phone there. I hate when I get spam calls, especially when I'm trying to record. Alright, so there we go. There is the Disc Duel Arena. And if you want, you could place another one of these right here, if you want to make it a little bit more symmetrical. Okay. And then we're going to pick this up and put it back. to get to the Creativitoys drawer, and I'm going to go left and pick up the locator. And we're going to place a few locators here on top of these blocks. So the first one we're going to place here with the little blue dot facing toward the player. Okay. And we're going to place one on each of those blocks too. That will be the starting point for the enemies. And if you want to make it a little bit more challenging, you can add a couple of more enemies and maybe put them over on these blocks. But start with 3 and see what you think. And the player is going to begin over here. Okay, with the little blue dot facing that direction. Okay, and then we're going to need a couple of trigger areas. And then we can start hooking everything up. Alright, so we'll place our trigger area down here at the bottom of our pit. Bring that up to that level and stretch it all the way across so it fills the entire bottom of the pit. Okay. That way when something falls through there, we'll know about it. And then we're going to place another trigger area over top of the challenge maker. Like that. Okay, let's put in the blip blocks next. So we're going to come over to our replayer, and we're going to use the replayer to put these in, because we want to be able to replace the blip blocks and replay the game. So I'm going to edit the properties, take the playback interval to 0, because we want these blip blocks to go in as quick as we can. And we're going to use this block here for the blip blocks. That's the square blip block. I'll go ahead and delete that since I've picked it up and put it back. That got me to that part of the editor. And now we're just going to step on the replayer to get the menu in the lower right corner. On my Wii U, I press B to start recording, step off to get back into the editor, and now we're just going to fill this floor with blip blocks. And I kind of like this to look like a program filling it up, so we're just going to go back and forth across here. And when it plays this back, it will go back and forth in the same direction we're going to fill this up until the entire floor is filled with blip blocks. And this is a lot of blip blocks. And this takes a little bit of time. I suppose I could fast forward through all this, but I know some of you are still kind of new to building in the toy box, and so I don't want to skip too much. My videos kind of assume you have some basic knowledge of the Logic toys and building, but I don't want to make it so that you have to be an advanced user to be able to build my toy boxes. And I want you to see exactly how I put this together so that your toy box will look and work the same way as mine. And again, this is a lot of blip blocks. It's going to take a little bit of time for the replayer to put all of these in when we begin the game. Okay, so there they are. I'm going to exit now. Step back on the replayer to get the menu in the lower right. Press B to stop recording and A to clear. Okay. Now there's a couple of things I want you to notice. First of all, if I come into the editor, notice where the memory meter is on the right. You can see it's starting to get up there. especially now that we're beginning to add the logic. And if you see kind of where that is, from the distance from the top, and we come and do a playback on our replayer and put all those blip blocks in, first notice how long it takes to put those in. It takes several seconds to do that. And if we come off the replayer now, go back into the editor, may not be too noticeable, but that did jump up a little bit. And so these blip blocks take up memory. And so there's a couple of things here that I want you to notice with this. Let me go ahead and clear the replayer. First thing is that I only want to put these in when I want to play the challenge. All right? And when we're done, I want to be able to take them out. And that's what we're going to use this button for. So if you're on a Wii U like me, and you finish playing this and you want to go play on the rest of the toy box, and you want to be able to recover the memory, this button will allow you to do that. But the second thing is if we wait until the invites are accepted on the challenge maker, by the time the challenge begins, the blip blocks are not going to be done being put into the toy box. And so that's why I put this trigger area out here, so that we can start putting the blip blocks in before the player even begins the challenge. And the idea is if they approach the challenge maker, they're probably intending to play the game. And so that's what we're going to do with this. So we're going to use the trigger area here to put those in. So on the trigger area, we're going to do a new logic connection. When entered by player any, we're going to come over to our logic gate and input into that gate. And this is going to help prevent us from clearing this replayer when we shouldn't be clearing it. All right. And basically the idea is we don't know when the player enters this if they've already played this game and the blip blocks are already there and we need to reset them. And so this is going to help us do that. So the first time we come into the toy box and play this, we're going to have the replayer be in the state where it's cleared. And so really what we want to do is have the level starter close that logic gate. So we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. And we're going to close this gate. Okay. And let me go ahead and drop a second button down here, just so we can use that to invoke the level starter. So we don't have to save the toy box, exit it, and reload it. We'll just press the button to invoke that. Okay. All right. And we'll push the button. And now that logic gate is in the closed state. Okay. On the logic gate, a new logic connection. On output, we will attempt to clear the replayer, which it's already cleared. So because this is in the closed state, if we walk into the trigger area, it'll try to input into the gate, but it won't go anywhere because it's closed. And that's good because we don't want to clear a replayer that's already cleared. That will corrupt the replayer. Right, so far so good. Now if it does happen to need to be cleared, then we need to give it a little bit of time before we actually play back the blocks, because it needs a little time to clear. And that is what this time delayer is for. And we're going to leave this set at the default of 1 second. All right. So the other thing we'll do on our trigger area is a new logic connection when entered by player any. We'll start our time delayer. And on the time delayer, a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we will play back the replayer. And that'll begin filling the blocks in. And we only want to do this once. So when the player enters the trigger area, when entered by player any, again, I would ideally love to turn around and have the trigger area deactivate itself, but I can't do that. So instead, we're going to input into this logic gate and use this as a pass-through. And on output from this gate, we'll come back to the trigger area and deactivate it. Okay? So when the player enters, it'll try to clear the replayer. And if this gate's closed, that means the replayer's already been cleared, so nothing will happen. And it'll also invoke the time delayer, and a second later it'll do a playback on the replayer, which will put the blip blocks in here. Okay. Now, if the player changes their mind or they play the game and they're done and they want to clear those blocks, this button is going to be used as a reset. And so on here, we're going to do a new logic connection. When pressed, we will attempt to input into this gate. So if the gate is open, that means that this has already has not been cleared yet. And on output from the gate, it'll do the clear. And the other thing we want this to do is a new logic connection. When pressed, reactivate the trigger area. Okay? All right. One last thing is when this replayer is cleared, we'll do a new logic connection. When it is cleared, we will turn around and close this to make sure that that's in the closed state so that it doesn't get cleared a second time. Okay, and so the question becomes is when does this get opened? Well, that'll get opened after we play the game. Okay, so initially, right now, it's in the closed state, so no clearing will happen. We'll just do a playback on the replayer. Okay, so that'll take the blip blocks in and out before the game and after the game. And now let's go ahead and implement the game itself. So we'll come over to the challenge maker first. Let's go down to the properties. And on the properties, we're going to leave most of these set the way they are. High to low, separate locations. On end location, we want to put the player outside of the arena. So we're going to, let's see here, use the locator for that. Okay, which means we need one more locator. Let me pick this little locator up. And we'll put the player out over here facing the arena, just in case they want to play that challenge again. All right, so on the challenge maker, we'll do a new locator connection. This will be the end location when the players are done. On the challenge maker, a new locator connection will connect to this locator for the player 1 start location. And on the challenge maker, a new locator connection will connect to this one for player 2's start location, if there's a player 2. Okay? And I think all of the rest of the properties in here we leave the same. Off, off, on, those all stay the same. Challenge type, let's set this to start on foot. Just in case the player does something crazy and drives a light cycle on top of this thing. Okay. Let's go over to the scoreboard next. And on the scoreboard, we'll go into the properties. We're going to play to, let's see, 1. Not that this really matters. We'll leave this off. We'll leave both of those turned on. So if you're playing with just 2 players, whichever one hits 1 first wins. And that's what the scoreboard is primarily for, is 2-player. Okay, this is what's going to tell us the end condition for the game. On the enemy wave generator, we'll connect that up to the locators that are out here. And there's 3 of them. And this will be for the single-player version of the game. And on the properties for the enemy wave generator, actually let's configure the wave first. So we'll add new, and we're going to use the Guavian soldiers from the Force Awakens playset. I like those. If you don't have them, or you don't have that playset, the Elite Sakarans will work as well. And I want 3 of these, so we'll use 3. Under Properties, we're going to take the generation delay to 0, and all the rest of these are the same. Okay. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection. On invites accepted, we'll come over to the scoreboard, and let's set that up first. So on the scoreboard, we'll do a reset. On the challenge maker, a new logic connection. When the game is started, we will activate the scoreboard. New logic connection. When the game is ended, we want to remove the scoreboard from the display. And by the way, we should do that on the level starter as well. Okay. And then we're going to do a new logic connection on the challenge maker on invites accepted. I want to come over and open the gate. Okay. And this is what we're going to use to connect the enemy wave generator to the scoreboard in a little bit. And a new logic connection when the game is ended will close that logic gate because it's not needed anymore. All right, and that is everything with the scoreboard except for the scoring, and we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to determine, are we playing single player or 2-player? And for that, we need the player counter here. And this has no properties, so we just need to invoke it. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection on, let's see, on started. If we do invites accepted, the enemies can get in here a little too early and start moving around before the player has a chance to. So we're going to do it on started. We'll come over to our player counter, and we're going to query the number of active players. All right? We want to know how many players do we have. And on the player counter, a new logic connection. For the query result, number of active players. Let's see if we have 1 player total. Then we're going to come over to the enemy wave generator and generate the wave. Okay? So if we only have 1 player, we'll put the enemies in. If you have 2 players, then this player counter will not broadcast that signal I just hooked up to, and so nothing will happen with the enemy wave generator. All right. On the enemy wave generator, a new logic connection. When the wave is defeated, we will attempt to input into this gate. And on output from the gate, we will come over here and increment by 1 the score for player 1. Okay? And the reason I need this, and I don't go directly from here to here, is because if the player dies, then we're going to be removing these guys at the end of the challenge, and we don't want to increment the scoreboard in that case. So that's why we're using this. Okay, on the scoreboard here, we're going to do a new logic connection. When the target score is reached by either player, we'll come over to the challenge maker and complete the game. And on the challenge maker, we need to link the score results. So we'll do a new score results connection, and we'll link over to our scoreboard so we display the results at the end of the game. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, end of the game. So, we want to come down here. So if any player happens to fall off of here and falls into this area, they fail the game. Okay? So what we want to do in this trigger area is a new logic connection. When entered by anything, player or AI or whatever it might be, we want to come over to our kill switch and defeat it. So no matter what it is, it's going to get destroyed. Okay? All right. Now a couple more connections. A new logic connection when entered by player 1. So if player 1 falls into this, we want to come up to the scoreboard. We want to increment the count by 1 for player 2. Of course, that's assuming we have a player 2. And you'll notice it made multiple connections. So let's go look at what it actually did here. Not that one. That one. So it also created for player 4 and player 3, which I don't really want, so I'm going to delete those links. All I care about is player 1, because on 3.0 I don't have any way to have a third or fourth player. Okay. And also, on our trigger area, new logic connection when entered by player 1, we want to come up and query our player counter up here. This is the second one that we've got. And again, we want to query the number of active players. And a new logic connection on that player counter. Query result, number of active players. If it's one player total, so we're only in one player mode and the player has fallen into there, then we want to go over to the challenge maker and fail the challenge. So game failed. Player 1 loses. Okay. Now if you're in two-player mode and the player 2 falls in here, then we're going to go new logic connection when entered by player 2. Then we'll come over to our scoreboard and we will increment by 1 the score for player 1. And again, it creates multiple connections, which I don't really want. So we'll come in here. Oops, what did I just do? Did I just delete that link? I just deleted the link. The whole thing. All right, let's do that again. New logic connection when entered by player 2. increment by 1 the score for player 1. And again, I don't care about player 4 or player 3. Okay. And by incrementing the score, that'll end up completing the game. Okay. Now, when the game is done, we need to do some cleanup. And there's another case here I need to do as well, but let me get to that in a minute. Okay, so on the challenge maker, we're going to do a new logic connection. If the game is failed, okay, so either the player dies or they cancel out of the game, we want to come over to our time delayer and start that, because we need to do some cleanup, but we have to wait until the player is out of the arena. Okay, we can't start doing a lot of cleanup until this thing is done with its job. And on the time delayer here, the delay of 1 second is fine, so we'll leave that. And we'll do a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, first thing we want to do is deactivate the scoreboard. Next thing we want to do when the delay is completed is we want to reactivate this trigger area so the player can play the game again. And we'll do a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we will open this logic gate protecting the replayer. So when the player does come back to replay it and they enter this trigger area, again, it'll try to input into this gate, which is now open, and it will clear the replayer, which will take all of the blocks out that are left from the previous game and replace them with a fresh set of blocks. And that's what that time delayer does. Okay, I am reviewing my notes, and I think that is almost everything. Okay, there's one other case here, and this is for the 2-player case. And we need one more toy that I forgot about, and that is the victory tracker. So we're going to drop that back over here. And there are no properties on this. So on here we're going to do a new logic connection. When defeats a player, so when player 1 defeats a player, we're going to increment player 1's score by 1. And it just created multiple connections, so let's go take a look at that. That may have saved us some time. So when player 2 defeats a player, we increment by 1 the score for player 2, so that's good. And once again, it created connections for players 3 and 4. You can leave those if you want, or you can take those out. I'll take them out. So if one of the players happens to defeat another player, then there you go. And a new logic connection. When player 1 is defeated, and this is the case where the enemy AI defeats the player by killing them. I'm going to need another one of these, because this will also get invoked in 2-player mode. Okay, so new logic connection. When defeated, When player 1 is defeated, we'll query the number of active players and a new logic connection on the query result if we're in single player mode and we want to come over here and fail the game. Okay, and that's pretty much everything. The last thing we need to do is put our wall in here to keep the enemies from running out of the arena. So we'll place this here, and let's go ahead and style this using the hologram theme. And we'll run a row of these down across the front of that. Okay. At this point, I'm going to save my toy box, and then I will come in here and test it out. So let me save this, and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, I have saved my toy box, and now let's go ahead and try out our game. So we approach the challenge maker, and you can see it's filling in the floor. So now we can step on the challenge maker, start the challenge. And we'll just wait for the enemies to come in. And there they are. Whoa, no! That was close. Hooray! Boy, that was a lucky win. Okay, so that was the case where I could win. Now let's go ahead and walk up into the box here, and you'll notice it's not it is not resetting. I'll cancel out of that. It should have replaced the blocks. So let me look at that, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. The connection that I forgot is on the challenge maker. I forgot to do a new logic connection. When the results are closed, I want to come over and invoke this time delayer for the cleanup. So that's what I forgot to do there, and that'll solve that problem. So we can do it manually though by pushing the button. I think. Maybe not. There it goes. Alright, so let's go ahead and step on the challenge maker. And let's try another case. I want to make sure this works. Oh no! Okay, so this time I win. Once again. Okay, so now the trigger area should be reactivated. I can walk into it. There we go. Now it clears it, and it puts a new set of blocks in. Okay, let's test one more case here, and that's the failure case. So when the player fails the mission. And that's easy enough to do. Just destroy a block, and away we go. Geronimo! Alright, so it puts me back here, and then it's going to fail the game. Challenge failed. Okay, the enemies are still out there though. They should have gotten cleaned up. So we missed another connection here. Let me go see what I forgot. We're looking for that connection to the time delayer. So on game failed, which is what happened, that should have invoked this time delayer. Oh, new logic connection. When the delay is completed, I forgot to defeat the wave. So that's what happened there. Okay. Well, the easy thing to do. That'll reset. We'll come in here and start the challenge again. They're going to start shooting at me before I'm ready to go here. And we'll die. It puts me here temporarily because it respawned me on the last safe place it could. Then it fails the challenge, and now the enemies are gone. And of course I walked up and now it's putting those back. So there we go. That is the logic for the Disc Duel challenge, and I believe I've got all the logic connections now. I do have logic diagrams on my blog, which you can follow along so that you make sure you make all of the connections. But hopefully just seeing how I miss those things might give you an idea how to troubleshoot the game when it goes wrong. But if something does go wrong, just go review the logic diagrams and the connections that you've made, because there's probably something not connected right or is missing. I'll put the link in the video description. And of course, if you want to make this a little more challenging, you can add another enemy or two, like I said before, but I would not add more than 5 because the arena will become too crowded. But that's all for me today. Before you go, leave a comment to let me know what you think of my Disc Duel challenge. Next time, I'll show you how to implement the logic for the light cycle arena. The logic for that challenge is actually very simple, and it's a fun game to play. You won't want to miss that, so be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already, so you'll know when I post the next video. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.